It looks at the entire facility as a whole and does a condition assessment. It starts to look long-term. What are the projected needs for the facility? What does the cost look like? What are the treatment deficiencies? Out of that improvement or that project, we identified that biosolids improvements are a high priority at the facility. And when liquid treatments, changes would be needed when you have more stringent limits that you need to meet for your discharge of the wastewater treatment facility. So again, addressing biosolid storage capacity is one of the purposes of the facility plan, along with addressing more stringent limits for nitrogen and phosphorus. And we want to continue to support the community growth for the next 25 years with our wastewater infrastructure. Flows and loadings, when we look 25 years down the road, we have to project out what flows and loadings we have to design around. We do that by looking at what the current values are for flows and loadings are the organic and solid portion that comes into the wastewater stream. And then we use some different criteria to project those flows and loadings out. So in the middle column is what the current values are from the last 6 years of data. And then the right-hand side is the proposed 2050 design criteria. Currently, wastewater at the facility is treated. It comes in from a couple of different lift stations, from one from Brainerd, one from Baxter. It goes through screening, which removes large debris and large material from the waste stream. Then it goes through grit separation, and grit separation removes the sand and the gritty material that's a part of the stream. And then it goes into sequencing back reactors. We'll learn a little bit more about those later. That's the organic treatment, biological treatment facility. The water that comes out of that process goes through ultraviolet disinfection before being discharged to the Mississippi River. Solids are produced whenever we treat wastewater, and we call those biosolids. So when we treat the wastewater, biosolids are produced. When we take those solids out, we store them in storage tanks, and then we run them through a thickening process, which removes some of the water from the solids, and then we store them. Currently, we send that thickened sludge through digestion, which breaks down the waste even more, before being stored in another tank, and then that biosolid is then land applied on agricultural fields. So kind of summarizing again, primary needs for biosolids treatment at the facility. MPCA, so the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, requires 180 days of biosolids storage at the facility. Historically, from 2014 to 2019, and again in 22, the facility did not meet that requirement of 180 days of storage. They had more solids that were generated than what they could store. And so that led to some issues and inefficiencies in the whole operation. Currently, it's kind of a year-by-year basis since 2022, where it's right at or below the 180-day requirement for storage. So storage is one of the primary needs, and biosolids processing is a primary need of the facility. The facility land applies biosolids, so what we do at the end of every 7 to 8 months throughout the year, they collect the solids and they will put those out on the fields. Land application of biosolids can be impacted greatly by weather. That's one of the big impact and drivers for conversion of facilities to different processes, is because when it's wet or when the conditions are right, we can't apply solids to the fields on the land. There's very strict requirements that goes into that. And then currently for the liquid side of the treatment, liquids process is not set up. The SBAs are not set up to treat future limits, more stringent nitrogen, more stringent phosphorus, or VOE or TSS limits. And so future liquid treatment improvements are required when we get more stringent limits. And then we also need to perform system improvements and maintenance on the facility, equipment replacement, electrical controls upgrades, building maintenance, items like that. So if we look at liquid stream alternatives, the goals for this are biological treatment and nutrient removal. This is our organic treatment. It's what treats the waste. And we want to make sure that we have a highly effective and efficient process to do so, that we know it's going to work for the future. We also want to consider solid removal as part of the treatment goal, because we also need to make sure we're removing the suspended solids in there, bacteria, and other types of solids that are generated in the wastewater. So when we look at the treatment alternatives evaluated, we considered 5 of the primary treatment alternatives in wastewater. Sequencing back reactors, which is the current technology, and then activated sludge, biological nutrient removal, integrated fixed film activated sludge, membrane bioreactors, and biologically aerated filters. Through the analysis and the facility planning process and discussion with staff, We narrowed this down to 2 primary treatment alternatives, which is sequencing batch reactors and activated sludge biological nutrient removal. The other 3, from a cost standpoint and feasibility standpoint, didn't meet the criteria for advancing forward with the final review process. So we're going to be considering SBRs and activated sludge moving forward. So SBRs they treat wastewater in batches. It's used for both biological removal of solids in one process unit, which is one of the advantages of an SBR, is you can condense your tank sizes down. However, they're not suited for large flow variations or loading variations, and some of that is due to just the nature of being in one single tank. You have less control over your biology and operation of the tank. Wastewater is all about biological treatment when we're treating waste. And with these type of tanks, being that it's in one tank, we want to control dissolved oxygen, we want to control loading and other parameters that go into it. One tank makes that a little bit more challenging. And so there's a large energy demand that goes into these because we're taking tanks from a low oxygen state to a high oxygen state and vice versa for different cycles. And that is a limiting factor with these SBRs because you have very little control over the operation of them. You're kind of subject to the proprietary equipment from the manufacturers. And so there is some limitations when it comes to these technologies for SBRs. When we looked at activated sludge biological nutrient removal, what it is, activated sludge in and of itself is just treatment of wastewater with microbes. And so the portion that makes this process unique is that we're doing this in a series of tanks. And so what we're doing, instead of one single tank where we want to modify and manipulate the operation, we have specific tanks of different biological conditions that we are able to treat the wastewater in. We add a clarifier at the end of that so that we're able to separate the solids and liquids very effectively, and that this process allows for an easy addition for tertiary filtration, or basically a final process at the end of the treatment facility to allow for more advanced filtration. This is the most common process when we look at wastewater treatment across the nation. There are many facilities, it's a proven technology that has been in use for many, many years. The biology in this concept is easily monitored. Again, we have those specific tanks for those microbes, and we can manage and control those biology in each tank. One of the advantages of these is we're not limited to proprietary equipment. It's all stuff that is readily available, it's easier to find, and we're not limited from a control standpoint. We have more control over the process with activated sludge. So in summary, when we look at this, SBRs would need significant modifications, and there's no guarantee that there are going to be future limits with the process set up, just with how the SBRs naturally operate. There's restraints with the proprietary equipment, and again, not a flexible operation. So the recommendation of liquids treatment would be to convert to the activated sludge biological nutrient removal process. This would be limit driven, however. So it doesn't have to happen today, tomorrow. However, when more stringent limits are added to the NPDES permit for the facility, that's when we would recommend conversion to the activated sludge B&R process. It would be optimized to meet future limits, it's operator friendly, and again, it's a known technology. When we look at biosolids treatment, again, wastewater treatment, we have liquids and a solids component to all of this. We identified 2 primary treatment options with future phases that would be in addition to either one of these alternatives. So alternative 1 would be keeping the existing process as it is, rehabbing new equipment, and additional sludge storage, because again, the biosolid storage is a limiting factor. And then the second alternative would be to remove the current process and build a dewatering facility at the plant. Future phases, which would be, again, added on, would be heat drying and then thermal destruction or thermal oxidation of the biosolids. So currently the facility has a 5,000 gallon truck to haul the solids. And on average, over the last 6 years, there's about 1,000 truck trips from the treatment plant to the fields and back to dispose of the solids. Currently those sites are about 10 to 15 miles away. And that equates to about 24,000 miles per year of truck travel just to dispose of the solids of today's production. When we look, we'll see in some slides in a minute here what that looks like down the road when we start actually producing more as we get more users in the system. And those solids are applied on, there's 1,300 approved acres with MPCA. The approval process is quite challenging to get acres approved. There's a lot of requirements that go into that. Historically, BPU has been applying to 300 to 400 acres of those 1,300, so about 25%. However, over the last couple of years, 24, 25, it's been over 50%, closer to that 600, 700 acres of land have been utilized. Some of that is due to the, sure here is where PFAS, the forever chemicals. There's some biosolids requirements that the MPCA has released that has limited how much biosolids we can actually apply to agricultural lands. And so as BPU follows those requirements, that land, we have to apply the solids, the same amount of solids to actually more acres, and that can impact the amount of available acres to actually apply the solids on. Currently, that takes about 3 BPU staff, about 7 to 8 months out of the year straight, disposing of the biosolids, because we're making solids every single day. If the weather's wet, we can't land apply. The fields are wet, there's snow, they're frozen, we can't land apply. And so that can cause a large impact at the facility where we would run out of solids and have nowhere else to store solids. So when we look at the alternatives to fix those issues, looking at additional sludge storage would look like we'd be building an additional sludge storage tank, about 2 million gallons of an additional tank. So a second tank up on the existing site. We'd have to purchase additional trucks, tractor, load-out equipment for hauling the biosolids, so that's additional capital O&M that goes into that. We're going to require another 3 staff, more than likely, to operate the facility to maintain the disposal effectively of biosolids. And with this alternative, land application is the only way to dispose of the solids. We can't go to the landfill, it'd be land application only. So again, we're limited with the acres that we have, and we're limited with the distance away the sites are. With this process, we would also rehab the digesters. Again, those chew up the waste a little bit more, breaks it down even more, and then you continue to produce methane gas with anaerobic digestion, and so you have to replace it, all the the gas burning equipment, the boilers, and all the other pumps, piping, other things that go into the digesters. When we look at the impact of digestion on land application, again, you can see we have liquid sludge, which is what we're generating from the thickening process, going to the digester, coming out at about 3% solids. When we look down the road, we're going to see we have about 1,300 truck trips per year and over 33,000 miles annually to dispose of the solids. And that assumes that we have the same sites and we have the same available acres to dispose of. Sites, if we lose sites and the sites get further away, those numbers will go up, and that increases your fuel costs, trucking costs, O&M costs. When we look at dewatering processes, so when we look at alternative 2, dewatering would decommission the thickening building, we decommission and get rid of the digesting equipment because we wouldn't need those anymore. We would construct a dewatering process with screw presses or centrifuges, and dewatering is getting more water out of the solids. And we're going to dewater to about 20% is the golden minimum. 20% is about the consistency of toothpaste. So if you think of a tube of toothpaste, that's what the level of dryness we want to get to. We would convert some of the tankage to additional sludge storage, again, to account for some of the increased biosolids production that we would see in the future. And then the advantage of a biosolid or a dewatering facility is that you have flexible options when it comes to storage, you have flexible options when it comes to transport, and it gives you flexibility when setting up for future processes such as drying. With this option, you can work with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to permit you for land application or landfill application. So you can actually send the solids to an approved landfill. And that allows you some flexibility. If you do produce a lot of solids and run out of storage space, you have a place to bring the solids. Again, on the left here is kind of our baseline of current process, looking down the road, 33,000 miles of trip. On the right-hand side is kind of the impact from dewatering. If we solids dewatered to a class B, which can be land applied or landfill, and we get to 20%. We cut our trips down to 150 trips annually and 3,700 miles of transport annually. I mentioned drying as a future phase of treatment for biosolids. Drying would be getting the product to a 95% dry product, so it's very dusty. That's in Minnesota, that's considered a Class A product. Drying systems follow dewatering systems. So in order to get to drying, you have to dewater first before going to drying. So that's why this would be one of the future phases when there's a dryer to go to drying. Construction of the biosolids handling building would be the first phase of this. We do the dewatering facility, biosolids management, and then you would build on a drying facility to this. Class A products in Minnesota simplify the final disposal, and we have less restrictions when we are applying it to land or going to the landfill, because we've broken down those solids even more and added a lot of heat to the product. In order to do drying, or in order to do thermal destruction or thermal oxidation, we have to do drying first to get to a percent dry before we incinerate or use a technology called pyrolysis to get it really, really hot and break those solids down even more. The driver to go to drying would be when land application becomes more stringent or not available, or you need to reduce how many solids are taken off the wastewater treatment facility site. Because again, you're going to see here, left-hand side, baseline, right-hand side, if we go to 20% solids and dry that to 95%, we're down to about 30 trips a year annually and 150 miles to the same sites. So significant reduction in truck costs and fuel costs to transport the solids and easier disposal of the solids.
Can I just ask a curiosity question?
Yes.
So if it's a 1,300 acres you're using now, or
That's what's approved.
does that land ever get saturated that you got to move on, or will it take it forever?
It depends on, there's a lot of things that go into that with the soil conditions and the amount of nutrients that a lot of testing goes into the solid before they're land applied. You have to test it. So there's nutrients you test for and then metals as part of that. And there are ceiling limits when it comes to land application sites. A lot of times the facilities, they have to be managed by how much nitrogen and phosphorus they're putting down, and it depends on the crop production that's being utilized. Some crops uptake more nitrogen, some uptake more phosphorus. Metals tend to be a limiting factor when we look at metals in the biosolids application to agricultural lands.
So is it possible we'd have to move on to other properties that are?
Potentially. Yep.
And farmers can opt out. What's that?
Farmers can opt out.
Okay.
Yep. Landowners may opt out of the program, and especially with the new biosolids PFAS program in Minnesota. Landowners, when biosolids are applied to their lands now, they are notified of what concentration of PFAS are in those solids.
Thank you.
Breaking this down into recommendations, so I'm sure you're all wondering, what did I just talk about for the last 25 minutes? So to do all these improvements, we recommend a phased approach, right? I talked about driving limits, driving needs for some of these improvements. Overall, the facility right now is looking good. However, there are the biosolids needs that are a critical component to this. So we're recommending constructing a new dewatering biosolids facility. So alternative 2, decommissioning the digesters and the thickening equipment. And we would also perform facility and system maintenance that would look at like equipment replacement in the pre-treatment building. That equipment has exceeded its useful life and it's starting to fail. There would be electrical improvements to replace obsolete electrical components and computers, and then facility maintenance such as roof replacements to fix the leaking roofs, and a few other components around the facility that require building maintenance. Phase 2 project, again, it's not today it could be 10, 15 years down the road, would be rehabilitation and modification of the liquid treatment stream to activated sludge biological nutrient removal. So conversion from the SBR to activated sludge. This would allow us to comply with future phosphorus limits, comply with future nitrogen limits, simplify the treatment process to an operator-friendly process that they know and can control, and it is your best opportunity for grant dollars when we start diving into the funding of all this. The third phase, again, which is driven by the need to reduce the biosolids processing for disposal, add heat grinding to the process. Everybody's favorite cost opinion. So when we break down SBR and activated sludge improvements, we have total project cost That's the cost for basically everything all in for our cost opinion. That's capital costs, that's engineering costs, that's contingencies, and a few other components built into that cost. For the SBR improvements, 58 to 72 million. Activated sludge, BNR, 70 to 88 million. When we look at the current total debt server annual O&M cost for the facility from historical records at BPU, it's at 5.2 million. And one of the key considerations when we look at alternatives is understanding what the additional O&M costs are per year and what it's going to take to operate a facility like this. When we look at the additional O&M for either improvement, we're looking at about $500,000 in addition to the baseline of 5.2 annual O&M every year. That's again, increases for maintenance, staffing, a lot of it's chemical feed to meet your phosphorus limits, and additional utilities, heat, power, you've got to power your blowers and other components like that. So that's the comparison for the liquids treatment portions. On the biosolids, again, we show 4 options here: expanding existing, which is alternative 1, dewatering alternative 2, heat drying, which is a future phase, and then thermal destruction for PFAS, which is another future phase. For the expansion of the existing process and rehab of the digesters, projecting a total project cost of 32 to 38 million. For dewatering, we're projecting a cost of 25 to 32 million. When we look at the heat drying and thermal destruction, those would be added on processes later on. You would gain some efficiencies by building buildings for the dewatering to accommodate future heat drying. There's some things that we do to build some efficiencies in there, but those costs would be additive because the technology is expensive, it requires a large footprint, and there's a lot of other process control that goes into that. Again, current baseline O&M at the wastewater treatment facility, again, for facility for treatment of the waste is 5.2 million. When we look at expanding the existing digestion system, we're looking at about $600,000 in additional O&M on top of that per year. For dewatering, we're projecting about $100,000 of additional O&M. So significant increase in O&M by rehabbing and maintaining the digesters at the facility. A lot of that cost is due to the utility cost for the natural gas. We have to burn a lot of natural gas to heat the digesters. You have to maintain a very specific temperature range to continue to treat the waste, and that natural gas cost gets very, very expensive. And that's using gas costs at $2026, not factoring in potential rate increases in natural gas utilities. When we look at drying and thermal destruction, those O&M costs will be additive to the dewatering. Right? So if we add dewatering, it's an additional $100,000 a year. If we add heat drying, additional $480,000. If we add thermal destruction, another $480,000. So all in, when you add all 3 of those processes in $2026, you're looking at about $1 million a year in additional O&M. And then one thing to consider between these 2 slides is the O&M for liquids is the liquids treatment. This is O&M for bios. So to get the overall O&M, you have to add the 2 together. So for the recommended improvements for this, we're looking at about $500,000 for O&M for active sludge, and then $100,000 here, so about $620,000 in additional O&M for the facility when converted to activated sludge. Breaking down our phased improvements for this project, looking at phase 1 improvements on the left-hand side, pre-treatment, biosolids, and the ancillary facility improvements, which is the system maintenance system needs. We can see we got $78 million in pre-treatment improvements, equipment replacement, and making that up to current electrical code. Biosolids improvements, dewatering is 25 to 32 million, and then the ancillary facility components again that $6 to $9 million range. Total project cost for phase 1 is about $42 million. Phase 2 is the conversion to activated sludge, and that's at $70 to $88 million anticipated capital cost. So rate impacts, and again, this table shows rate impacts for the wastewater treatment facility portion only. We're not considering collection or other components that go into some of that. This is for the treatment plant only. And what we can see is in the middle column, we have the proposed phase 1 budget where we annualize all the costs, look at the annualized capital, O&M, existing debt service that BPU currently has. And then we can break down the anticipated treatment cost for the average user within the system, within the collection system. Phase 1 improvements, users would potentially see a $53.45 increase in the treatment portion of the rates. And by going to phase 2, assuming that there's debt service from phase one, you would see about an $80.85 increase just on the treatment component alone for those services
That's
per month increase. So,
Is your phase two number additive to the 53, so you're at 130, or are you at 80?
no. They're not active. Any other questions? This is kind of one of the primary slides. So funding sources, funding is an important part to any large infrastructure upgrades or improvements. Funding sources include Clean Water Revolving Fund through the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority. That's typically a low interest loan at 1 to 3%, and it's over 20 to 30 years historically. I mentioned earlier when you convert to activated sludge process into liquids treatment, one of the best ways to get grant dollars is when you get a limit for that. There's PSIG dollars that are eligible to cover the cost of the treatment. PSIG is a point source implementation grant. That is a grant for 80% of eligible portions up to a cap of $12 million. There's also affordability grants, the WIF, Water Infrastructure Funding Grant. That one is a income-based grant to reduce the impact of raising rates to community members. That has a cap of $9 million. Some other funding opportunities are city bonding, capital state bonding requests through the MMB portal, assessments, and congressional spending dollars from federal representatives, House and Senate. So next steps, facility plans in Minnesota are due first Friday in March of every year. So we have a public hearing. Part of the statute is to have a public hearing. There'll be a public hearing at the Brainerd Public Utilities Commission Tuesday, February 24th at 9 a.m. At that commission meeting, the commission will approve the resolution to adopt the facility plan, and then we'll finalize everything in the facility plan, put it together, submit it to MPCA. MPCA typically gets a preliminary approval back to us in June, and then we would roll right into a preliminary engineering for phase one improvements from June through the end of the year, with looking at a final design over 27 and a bidding process starting in late 27, early 28 to meet the CIP plan for BPU. Anticipate a 20 to 30 months construction phase or project schedule for phase one, and we would want to continue in this process to monitor future limits and develop a decision matrix for when we want to convert to activated sludge process. And with that, I'll take questions.
Council?
Morgan. I do have a copy of the draft facilities plan if anybody wants to take and read it. I do have it right here.
It's only 205 pages long, so.
No problem. I read it, it's all right here. We have it too.
So the goal is assuming if this is approved, or when this goes, if and when this goes through, construction starts winter 2027, 28. Looks like about a 2 to 3 year construction phase. Would that be, when would this hit people's bills? Like phase one, would it jump that $51.65 at the end at final construction, or what are we looking at on that?
Some of that would be determined during a rate study. I know BPU is working through a rate study currently. And so some of those numbers, it's hard to predict exactly when those numbers would start to be added on to utility rates. Typically, when we go through a PFA funding process, we need to make sure we have the rates are able to cover any of the debt service that's projected for the project to close on the loan for PFA. And so as we work through the rate studies, BPU works through the rate study, they'll be able to have a more definitive answer about how much rates need to rise from a percentage increase. Because again, these numbers are looking at the treatment facility only portion, not the collection or lift stations and gravity collections, stuff like that yet.
That's what chime in, Morgan. That $50 a month, that's not your $50 increase, that was for projected $50 a month for the wastewater portion only. So it's not like a $20 increase from now.
But just point of clarification, that is BPU's rate to.
Yes, that is an
Brainerd.
average rate for
Yes.
just a representative who's in the system.
If you go back to that slide, the portion of the operational expenditures applicable to the city of Baxter is in that 263 to 394. You're referencing those $50. We have the same items, the lift stations, the operations side, that we would have to do a similar process in identifying the rates, a rate study that we would have to be doing almost simultaneously at the same time once we have more solid numbers to go with.
So if the project were awarded a bunch of grant dollars, does that mean that the cost to consumers would drop?
More than likely, yes.
The construction cost, the processing cost per month, what is that number?
The O&M would stay the same, but your capital cost goes down because you can cut that number down with grant dollars.
Yeah, one thing, Mark, is that this does have the debt service in there on an annual basis too, at the full amount.
Yes.
So this number would change, but the O and M, we can't buy that now with any grant funds.
Correct.
And yes, BPU is not doing our rate study, they're doing the city of Brainerd rate study for their customers.
For their customers in Brainerd.
And these are statewide requirements coming down the pike. Every city's gonna be facing this, or?
There's a lot of communities that have been impacted by more stringent limits, and there's a lot more that will be impacted by more stringent limits. Minnesota has released the nitrogen reduction plan for wastewater treatment facilities. And so that has detailed out the plan to reduce the amount of nitrogen loading to the Mississippi River Basin, which goes to the Gulf of Mexico, that contributes to the hypoxic zone down there. And so there are more stringent limits coming. It's hard to predict when those will be impacted because there's kind of a pause on the rulemaking process right now. But it's not stopped. It is happening. It will happen. And that's where conversion to activated sludge would be that limit driven for nitrogen and phosphorus.
And explain, Morgan, when is Brainerd's permit due? And it's a 5-year cycle permit.
Yes.
When does this have to be in place in order to meet the new permit?
Yeah, so permit-wise, we're looking at PDS permit, they're a 5-year permit. And then, so Brainerd's permit is, expires February of 27, I believe. It's February 27, but 6 months before that, we have to apply for the revision or the application for the new permit. And that process takes quite a bit of time. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. And so those permits are good again for 5 years. When those permits are open and being reviewed by MPCA, they can add items to the permit such as new limits. They can add other conditions for monitoring requirements to those permits. And in the next permit cycle, it's more than likely we would be added to the nitrogen monitoring list to monitor for nitrogen and sulfate even, or chlorides possibly. And when we start looking at that, and then that's the first stage of getting a limit. When you're on monitoring, the next permit cycle, you could get a limit out of that. So that's 10 years down the road. And then typically MPC would give you a 5 to 10 year compliance schedule to complete the improvements. So 15 years is potentially when we could see a nitrogen limit that has to be met.
And that means we have to then go to activated sludge
Yes,
15 years from now.
exactly. And that would be meeting the limit in 15 years. You would have 1 to 2 years of heavy technical design, 1.5 years, and then you probably have a 3-year construction window. So you back that out, you're down to 11 years before you're planning to go to activated sludge and getting design started.
So phase 3 ain't very far out.
So staff, what is being asked of us is,
Tonight is presentation only, we're not
Yes.
here seeking approval of the plan or things of that nature. The one thing that I do want a general consensus from the council, or what staff is looking for a general consensus, is the support to work with the city of Brainerd and BPU, along with Bolton and Mink, to explore all funding opportunities, may that be grants
Stoppers projects by March 7th.
Council, any other questions or? Pretty bleak. You know, everybody wants to do the right thing. We do, but man, how is, where are all these funds gonna come from? You know, it's, we're one city, so it's, or two cities, but it's phenomenal. So, Brad, is that in the agenda later on, or?
No, just right now, just looking for a general consensus. If there's any objection for
Gotcha.
using staff resources to work with the other resources from the Brainerd and BPU and Poland Mink, we will be working with them to submit the necessary applications for the various funding opportunities, probably over the next 6 to 9 months. As Trevor alluded to, Representative Stauber does have a request out to local communities for direct appropriations, and so our intent is to try and meet that deadline for March 4th, I think.
March 7th.
March 7th.
And to continue to monitor that, and I continue to monitor their congressional spending dollar portals for, you know, such as Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith, and a few other ones for the area.
We're in agreement? Yeah. Beautiful choice. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, your time. Number 2, guidance and best practices for citywide speed limits.
All right, good evening. I'm sure you guys are aware, but I'm Justin Anamis, I'm a traffic engineer with SEH. I'm here today to cover some general guidance and best practices on a couple of different traffic-related topics. This kind of came about, the city's received more and more complaints from residents, mostly just related to vehicle speed and roadways. We're wondering kind of guidance and best practices on things the city could do to, I guess, limit speeds. First thing we looked at was citywide speed limits. So under state statute 169.114, the city could reduce the speed limit, statutory speed limit in the city to 20 or 25 miles per hour. That statutory speed limit would apply to local residential streets citywide. The city also has the power to change speed limits on other city streets, like state aid streets, Clearwater Road, Inglewood Drive, Memorywood Drive, more of your busier roads within the city. These types of streets typically have specifically signed speed limits, where the statutory speed limit are roads without signed speed limits. Speed limits on these roadways should be specifically studied to make sure that you're using an appropriate speed limit. MnDOT does speed studies for all of their roads. They believe Trevor have done some maps here before. Generally test speeds, and you set the speed limit closer to what vehicles are operating the speed at. So you have a little less control there where the statutory speed limit is set it throughout the city. One thing I will note is changing speed limits alone is not effective in lowering vehicle speeds without other traffic calming measures. So if you have a 30-mile-per-hour roadway, but people are going 45 because it's wide and they feel like they can, just changing that to, let's say, 20 isn't going to make a big difference. We also looked at some examples of some other cities. Minneapolis, St. Paul, and St. Louis Park were kind of the early adopters after this statute went into effect. They went with 20 miles per hour on kind of their smaller residential streets, and then typically went with 25 miles per hour on their larger streets. And they had some specific use cases where they wanted to maintain 30 or 35 miles per hour. Minnetonka and Edina waited a little bit to see how those cities did, and then adopted theirs. They actually went with 25 miles per hour for their local residential streets and kept those major streets at the typical statutory speed limit of 30 miles per hour. Before I move to the next topic, does anyone have any questions on this one? All right, the next thing we looked at, one of the big things the cities hears, and a lot of cities hear, is, hey, can you put a stop sign here? You kind of have to be specific about where you place stop signs. They're not as effective if you have a bunch of unwarranted ones. So, I guess first, the primary purpose of the stop sign is to assist with traffic control and prevent crashes by signing right away at intersections. And one of the more recent things is stop signs used to be used to control speeds. That is no longer something you should be doing. They're not really effective at reducing vehicle speeds. What you actually find is people will speed up in between stop signs because they are trying to make up for the lost time and they had to stop. The other thing you don't want is a bunch of unwarranted stop signs because they can result in poor stop compliance and reduce safety at intersections. So it's important to place those at the correct locations based on guidance and engineering studies. Within the city, an engineering study would be recommended at any location where you look to add a stop sign to make sure it's appropriate at that location. In general, two-way stop control are at intersections of a less important roadway with the main roadway, where reasonable compliance with the law is not expected without signage. A street entering the highway with a daily volume of 6,000 or more. Unsignalized intersections within a signalized area where the rest of the intersections all have traffic control, you'd like to provide stop signs to create that control there. Intersections where sightline issues require vehicles to stop to see conflicting traffic, and if there's crash issues at existing intersections without good stop control. In general, most kind of uncontrolled neighborhood streets don't need stop signs because the volume is so low that a lot of times you don't even have two vehicles in the intersection at one time, so you can see anybody coming, kind of assign right away yourself. All-way stop control can be used as an interim solution while you wait for a traffic signal to be able to be installed. Again, crash issues if you have more than 5 in 1 year, intersections meeting specific volume thresholds, sight distance issues where vehicles need to all come to a stop at the actual intersection in order to see vehicles coming from the other directions. And then allocations where you need to control left turns or vehicle pedestrian conflicts. Does anyone have any questions on that? Dynamic speed feedback signs. These provide immediate feedback to drivers on their vehicle's speed. And it's posted in conjunction with speed limit signs as is shown on that image on the right side. We found these effective in reducing high speed. High speeds along roadways can result in about a 3 mile per hour reduction in 85th percentile speeds. Doesn't feel like a lot, but I can tell you if you're out there, it makes a difference. It's recommended to collect speed data to understand the speeding issues before placing these. And if speeding issues do exist, then you would place these feedback signs near the roadway entrance.
Do you have an idea what the cost is for one of those? I find it to be very effective, just personally.
Trevor, do you know?
Just ballpark.
You know, Alex, what it cost down in Knollwood? 3 years ago.
I have a number, but I'm not super confident.
I'm not confident yet, but it's over a couple $100,000.
For one sign?
No, for two. You put two of them, you put one each direction, and then take and wire it all in. Yeah.
A couple $100,000?
It's not that.
It's not that bad.
There's a few thousands. I wanna say in the Nolan, it was 12 to 15,000 if I recall, per. I have a computer.
We can look it up, but it's not as cheap
It's
as you think.
Yes.
It's effective to me, that's why I was.
We got them going in on Clearwater.
Yeah.
Would have been on Forest.
If Neil were here, he might know the cost of those.
Neil probably would know.
Yeah.
What
There's
it's-
a delay.
Yes. There is a cost, it's not as significant as maybe some of these other speed calming measures I know. And yeah, I've heard from tons of people that they're just effective. They can remind people that, sometimes you don't even realize you're going too fast.
Yeah.
It reminds you you're going too fast. where if you go too fast with 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, it just says slow down.
Kind of yells at him.
Yeah, initially they found that if it always reported your speed, people would go for high scores, so they got rid of that.
So on that note though, it seems to me like we're talking about putting those signs there. You mentioned because people don't notice they're going that fast.
Yeah.
That seems to me to imply that maybe our roads are too wide and too straight, and it's, people are not noticing they're doing 50 and a 30 because the roads are made for 50-mile-an-hour speeds.
Yeah, I mean, that can be part of it. The other part is be some people just drive too fast and then this sign reminds
Your
them.
granddaughters are fast.
Yeah, it's a combination, speed's obviously a combination of a lot of things with lane widths and trees and kind of narrowing that spatial field can all help.
The signs are 5,000 to 7,000 piece. And you guys, yeah, install
Yeah, the wire, the electrical, everything else to it.
installation.
The city always wires them, right? They don't use the solar panels that,
We've got all ours wired in there,
that way they're on all the time, not just.
and I know they're more than that, Mark, because the computer itself is a downloadable by Bluetooth, so.
So you get back to us on that. Marcus, we're straying away here. One of the things that we heard during the 2 years of discussion of the overpass was the flashing lights approaching an intersection. And why are we doing more of those? Those are fairly effective. Just curious what the cost is, not tonight, but what the cost on those is, and if there are some major intersections that, we should think about that. Gives people a chance to cross that. That's only for stoplights, so.
And MnDOT has discontinued that. I don't know why that night when MnDOT was here, when Mark asked that question, they took them out and they're taking them out at every new signal like they put in, they're not finding them effective. So the ones they put in about 10, 15 years ago and did it throughout the state as a pilot project, all those are coming out. So they're not even doing that anymore for signal lights. And I don't know why, I've never looked into it.
You're talking about the lights that say prepare to stop?
Yeah.
I have not heard they're removing all those.
They're removing-
That's an interesting choice.
And I don't know if it's the choice of the district or if it's from central office, but MnDOT District 3 is discontinuing and pulling them all out.
Okay.
When they replace the signal. Because we couldn't put them in 2022 and Englewood in 2010.
Next one we looked at are speed humps, not to be confused with speed bumps, which are the little ones that are on private property. Speed humps are longer, they're about 12 to 14 feet long, and they're a little bit smaller. So it's more of a gentle rocking motion when you go over, but enough to alert you that you go over it too fast. They're recommended for residential local streets or roadways providing access to parks or schools. Speed limits of 30 miles per hour or less. Low traffic volumes, typically less than 1,000 vehicles per day. Non-emergency or transit routes, you don't want to be slowing down emergency responses. And then buses, obviously, worry about clearance. Most effective when they're placed in series, about 200 to 500 feet apart. And they require pavement markings as kind of seen in those two examples there. Just kind of warning drivers that they're coming up, and then signage to warn drivers that they need to slow down before they go over this. The benefits, they're relatively cost effective. Sorry, I didn't look up the number, but I can. They divert cut-through traffic through like local residential streets if that's a problem that's occurring. Improve safety, 33 to 48% reduction in crashes. More effective speed management than signing and striking alone. Again, just because you actually create a physical barrier that they have to slow down for, otherwise their car's gonna have to let the ball. The challenges is limited applications because you can only put it under low speed, low volume residential roadways. And the other problem that we always run into is winter maintenance and snow plows, and how they deal with these. Any questions on those before I move to our?
I would have a question about what is the winter maintenance? I mean, is that something that the plow has to slow
Yeah, really, they just have to lift their blade kind of to go over it, and it just takes a little more time, and then, they forget, and that could be quite a problem.
You could rip the belly blade right off the truck. You forget to lift your belly blade as you're going over.
And cause damage to the hump itself.
Yeah.
Required to be replaced.
Last topic was center line pavement markings and no passing zones. 2-lane collector on arterial roadways within Baxter have center line markings. On roads like Clearwater, Emeryville, Excelsior, etc. And then MUTCD guidance says center line markings should be provided if it's an urban arterial collector, it's 20 feet wide, 4,000 vehicles or more. Rural, it goes down to 18 feet wide and 3,000 vehicles or more. When there is center line markings, there's no passing zone should be signed and striped based on locations with inadequate sight distance. Or if there's specific safety concern, passing should be allowed in other areas, unless an engineering study determines a need to prohibit passing. Kind of the summary of that is you can't just go out and stripe no passing zones everywhere on these types of streets. You need to follow the guidance. Any other questions or comments?
Questions and comments? So where are we at with this, Brad?
Oh, the shutter. This was just a guidance document that we put together for the public. So all it's looking for on consent is just acceptance of it. And you gotta make sure that you're behind it. This is what we'll be telling the public is available to them. If they come in with a speeding complaint, come in with this is how the city is going about doing things. This is what's available to us. So it's a kind of a guidance policy for the general public of Baxter.
So, based on what you see here, are we implying that we'll put speed humps in? Aside from speed humps, what I'm getting out of this is what we're gonna get is a lot of requests for the dynamic speed signs.
Yeah. Could be, then do we take the policy further of what really warrants a dynamic speed sign? On what type of road, what's the traffic count, what's the speed? And you take and make the policy deeper yet. This is just a general guidance document of this is what's available to the city of Baxter to try to keep speeds under control.
So then, is there access to any data by the police department on which roadways drivers get ticketed most often? Would that come into?
None of that is in there, no, but we get complaints all over the city.
So-
Yeah.
No, but there must be a couple of roads that have more complaints.
Yeah, your main feeder roads like the Clearwater, Excelsior, Englewood, where there's high amount of traffic.
Right, and
That's
the
where we're
roads
getting the
too
majority
fast.
of the complaints. Not saying that we don't get complaints on small residential streets, but they're more of a single resident that is making those complaints, not a mass amount of people that are mowing.
Mr. Mayor, I would be, what's the right word in here? Cautious in calling this a policy, when it's really general best practices. Because we really haven't sat down and said where we would impose it, or how we would impose it, or what conditions we would do it. Like you say, the intent of people coming in asking for it, how do we fund it? Are we currently not painting all center lines of the streets now, are we just doing center lines?
Just center lines is all we do right now. We did that pilot project down in South Forest View, last year to narrow the lanes and do the fog lines.
Right, but we haven't set any no passing zones, or we don't have signs up for no passing, do we, on anywhere
We
streets?
stripe according to the no passing zones, coming in this, on curves, coming into two stop signs as per the MUD manual. So the striping is per the MUD manual on all of our streets. But we don't put curves, we don't have to put the no passing signs up if it's only a certain speed limit and a certain distance in between the passing zones. So you've got to look at the MUD manual. A lot of signs are not required on our low speed roads. It comes into effect when you start going over 45 miles an hour. So signs has not been a part of our regime, with just striping is all we've been doing.
Yeah. I guess I have the comment, or a couple maybe, that I think this is it's a lane width issue more than anything. And I would argue that all the signage in the world isn't gonna do a whole lot, especially when you think of where the complaints are coming from. It's easy to say everybody drives too fast except for me, and that's just a common thing. I guess I would just say, you know, you can either engineer those out with humps and roundabouts and things that actually force traffic to calm, or we could request that the police department create a reputation that they don't want to create, and then people will have one more thing to complain about, but maybe they'll slow down a little bit. I just doubt that anything that was listed here would actually slow traffic. I just drove Cypress Drive the other day and had to almost hurt my neck to see that sign that says that there's school buses, because it's so wide. You wouldn't notice it if you were looking for it. So I think that a lot of these are feel-good things that aren't gonna do a whole lot of good.
The speed dynamic signs have done about the best, because we can collect the data from them and we can figure out exactly when the speeding is happening, which helps. You know, what time of day, is it on the weekends, is it during the week? That helps. But it does, I guess it does remind somebody when they drive past it, but does that change the behavior? Or like some of the kids, we had to set a top limit of, like in 30, it only goes to 35, and then it just flashes that you're not complying, because they were seeing how fast they could get it to go up to when we first put them in. Because there was someone clocked at 60, 65 on it.
It's not funny, but it's.
If I'm hearing you right, Mark, I think I agree with it. Let's not do a knee-jerk thing here.
I do agree with Mark, it's probably more like best management practices, but
Let's study it a little bit better.
Streets.
Utilities Commission or somebody take another look at it.
The action tonight is just to accept the report, it's not to do anything. No policy making or that, so accepting the report is just accepting the findings of SEH and the categories in which were just described, so.
no, I probably misspoke on that. The policy will probably come out of this if you get pushed by the public, you know, to do stuff. Like, what is the policy? Because it's the same problem we're having, that we're addressing right now in utilities, is the mid-block sidewalk crossings and trail crossings that we've been starting to put in. Should they be put in all over? Because then we're getting more and more requests of that. Well, that's a budgetary item, and then it comes, do you really need it in mid-block on every single street? So that's being talked about as writing a policy right now and bringing it through the city council.
Just a quick question, Justin, and maybe Trevor reached out. The context of the city establishing speed limits is relatively new off of, was it last few legislative sessions that allowed for those non-MSAS roads to,
I believe that was 2019 was that 169.4.
Just before COVID.
and I think it was implemented right around COVID or just after, yeah.
Just before COVID it went into effect. But most cities are still doing, unless they do the whole city. If you do the whole city, like some of them did, and you have that up there as the example. Do it all as 25, do it all as 20 on all your residential streets. Then that's pretty simple under that state statute, but otherwise,
I'm just,
speed studies.
I'm bringing it up for reference because historically it's all governed by MnDOT, it's all governed by that. There was that point in time where that switch turned, and I just want that to be in the record for everyone at the table to know is that it was true that MnDOT did have a much larger role in determining the local speed limits, but then the reins were loosened per se around that 2019.
MnDOT won't even do a speed study. They still won't do a speed study on a local street if it's under so many cars a day, as per what he showed up there. They just say leave it at 30 as per the statute, or change it citywide to the 20 or 25. So, most of our speed studies have all been on all new road segments that we've added over the last 26 years.
I will note anecdotally that striping you did down in South Forest View, at a minimum, I see fewer cars in the left lane going around the curve at Forest, or at River Vista coming up to Forest View. That was common before it was signed, that people would dip into the left lane to make that curve. And I think it's made a difference.
I know the walkers down there feel like it's made a difference. We never did get the survey put out. We're gonna go put a survey out to that neighborhood early this winter. We never got it done. We were gonna follow it up and see what people thought, but we're still thinking about doing that in the spring when everybody's back out walking. But I've heard a lot of walkers enjoying it. They feel like at least they got a safe spot out there. They're not a target.
I think it makes at least a small difference. You don't feel like you're able to pay close attention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All sorts of fun presentations tonight. Right. So tonight, we will be starting with the 2026. So tonight, we're starting with the 2026 Mill Overlay Improvements Project. Just going over the feasibility study. And kind of a little bit of the progression that we had going on here. Previously, the project included residential full depth reclamation and commercial full depth reclamation. Due to the tight timeline as far as the going for approval of the feasibility study and holding the approval hearing typically happens a lot sooner in the year. Being that we're mid-February, it would be very tight in the schedule to do the full depth reclamation project areas. It's possible, but we'll get to the recommendation here. So the most important thing to remember is kind of this graph. The roads we're looking at are in the category right now for a mill and overlay and FDR. And in between there, as we get just past, as we're just passing that mill and overlay, that's kind of its steepest portion. And that's where a lot of these roads are at right now, especially in the mill and overlay portion. So the recommendation from us would be to still move forward with the mill and overlay portions of the project. That is absolutely feasible to be completed this year. And the reason it's recommended is as these roads decline, they hit that mill and overlay, and they decline a little bit quicker, and they get to that full depth reclamation portion, and then they kind of even out. So as they get into past the full depth reclamation, towards where that dotted line is, it starts to even out, and then it just gets worse, a little slower. Eventually, it reaches that point. So, for the mill and overlay roads, the first 6 roads are in the Mississippi Meadows neighborhood, consisting of Joneswood Drive, Joneswood Circle. Joneswood Circle was a 6, and from a pacer rating standpoint, was a 6 in 2022. and a 4 in '25. Similarly, Joneswood Drive was a 6, and now it's a 5 and a 6, so a portion of that road is getting a little bit worse than the other portion. Joshua Tree Circle went from a 6 to a 5, same with Joshua Tree Drive. And to mention, all the roads in this Mississippi Meadows area are 26 feet wide with 3.5 inches of bituminous and 5 inches of class 5. As a whole, the drainage is okay. There's not a lot of areas that we're aware of that are problematic during medium rain events or anything like that. Knotty Pine Drive and Marble Road, both kind of staying in that 6-ish range. Knotty Pine Drive doesn't see a whole lot of traffic. It's kind of that middle road up through there with just 4 or 5 houses on it. Marble did go from a 6 to a 5 and a 6. You can see there's a couple pretty bad portions in there. Next is Cherrywood. That was improved in 2005, or this portion of the road was improved in 2005. 26 feet wide, 3.5 inches of bit and 4 inches of base. That road from 2022 to 2025, going from a 6 to a 5 and a 6. There are some drainage issues on Cherrywood Drive, and we looked into a couple options. In the past, we understand that there's been some fairly significant flooding in the early 2000s that did cause some property damage. So we looked into some options to provide an overflow for that stormwater, and that would be taking it south to the city property. There's a city basin down there south of the church that we would tie into. Along with, there are some water main exploratory excavations, because in that study that was completed and combined just a couple years ago, there's some potential plastic fittings in there that are known to fail. Timberlane Drive and Park Street Woodland were all constructed as part of the Parkwood area improvements in 2001, and chip sealed in 2014. Those roads are 26 feet wide with 3.5 inches of bit and 4 inches of base. For Timber Lane specifically, it went from a 7 in 2022 and going to a 5 and a 6 in 2025. So that is kind of starting to hit that increased deterioration in that road. Some more water main exploratories anticipated, and some hydrants that need to be restored there. On Park Street, that went from a 7 to a 6 in that 3-year span, and similar improvements as far as the water main exploratory. Woodland took the brunt of that, going from a 7 to a 4 on the PACER rating. 4 does bring it into a full depth reclamation category. Since this is a shorter stretch of road, this would be a good candidate to take a look at some full depth spot repair and repair some of those areas like this where there could be some subgrade failure, and then do a mill and overlay on top of that.
Why did that road just take a nosedive so? Just.
Without doing a core or anything like that, it's hard to say how much base was there. A lot of times when you see that, it tends to just be a subgrade failure. But other than that, I'm not sure.
One thing we've had, Alex, is 2 or 3 years here in a row, really bad freeze-thaw cycles, which really shows up on what it does to the pavement. When you have these constant freeze-thaw like this, that's happening right now, it's the worst thing for bituminous streets.
Yeah, but like this one just took a dive versus all the other roads. It just kind of.
I was surprised to see it as a 4. When I originally walked the roads, it was fairly in line with Timber Lane and Park Street. So I was a little surprised to see that as a 4. But it's areas like this where you can see that subgrade failure that, you know, could have pushed it over that edge for that evaluator. So, as a whole, what we would do is go in and mill the top 1.5 inches, and then lay down 2 inches of bituminous that on top. Like I mentioned, we would do some full depth spot repair in those areas that are thin or the cracking carried all the way through and it came out of the milling machine. It does happen. Along with that, we would do sanitary sewer castings, rings, go through and do the rehab on those, mailbox supports, and as I mentioned, the Cherrywood stormwater overflow.
Would those locations be a candidate for maybe some type of geotech? Would it be asphalt in between layers?
It could. We didn't look into that. You just mean from like the subgrade standpoint of Woodland, where it was where it's categorized as a 4. That's an effective option. I understand from pavers, they don't really like dealing with it. It can be a pain, but it does help. Yeah. So from an overall cost standpoint, the total project is $1.5 million, with $71,000 in city roadway, estimated $186,000 for the stormwater improvements, $169,000 for the water main improvements, leaving just over $1 million in assessable costs, dividing that amongst 142 ERUs, giving a $7,600 assessment per ERU. So we had started this process in 2025, actually, and the report has evolved quite a bit until now. So the next step after tonight would be holding an improvement hearing for just the mill and overlay roads, with plans and everything starting there shortly after, and opening bids in July. Any questions?
This is on the agenda later, Brett, correct?
Correct.
Any questions on the study thus far? Okay. All right, thank you.
Next.
Are you next?
I am next.
2027.
Yeah, we'll talk about 2027. So just to kind of go over, the primary reason for this is talk about the model schedule. So we'll just go over the previous, what we understood to be previously. So that would have been 19 roads across the city of Baxter, residential mill and overlay, residential FDR, and commercial FDR. With adding the 7 residential commercial FDR roads, it brings us to 26 roads across the city. Very similar to what we did in 2024 with Knife River. Given the proper schedule, a project like this is very doable. Although it can be uncomfortable with construction all over the city, it is very doable. We proposed phases for the contractor to make it a little bit easier as far as a traffic standpoint. So not everything is open and closed at the same time. So we would do a very similar approach with this one. And then also highlighted here, the roads in 2028 and 2029. So red is 2028 and then blue is 2029, just to give you an idea of the scopes of those 2 projects as well. Granted, this will be during the construction of the interchange.
That's the problem of 28 and 29, is the overpass. Do you want to really be in any of these commercial areas during that overpass project?
So as I mentioned, kind of the model project schedule that, again, is the goal. So this allows for proper notification to the residents, due diligence to the residents, to give them an idea, or one, notify them that assessment is potentially coming, and two, giving them an idea of what that financial impact could be so they can prepare for it. It's never a good feeling to have an assessment and not really know what's coming. So this allows 18 months, so from the assessment hearing to the public informational meeting, the first meeting that we hold for the project is 18 months. That gives them a year and a half to save up and understand that this project is coming. So say the project would be constructed in the construction season 2027, we're ideally letting them know in July of 2025 and holding a meeting in September of 2025. We initiate the project in July of 2025, put together some preliminary numbers, start the report, and then present that in September. Where we're at now, holding a public informational meeting in March would give them 12 months prior to the assessment hearing, which is still a good amount of time to be able to save up and just be aware of the project. But, you know, the goal would be that 18 months notification. So as a whole, what's estimated right now for the 2027 is about $12.5 million in total cost. The 2026 project brought in, you know, $2.6 million on top of that already fairly large project. So yeah, that's going to be a big project. Any questions on, more specifically, the schedule? Just your thoughts on that. That's something that you would agree with as an overall process, because that's what we'll try to do as these projects get initiated.
Yeah, more time is always good too. We've been, chastised about that in the past, or, spring them up, and so the more the better. Anybody else?
Major improvement.
Yeah, yep, that's the goal.
Yeah, thank you. Brad, are you on next?
Yeah, I'll take the last item. As council is aware, we do have a sick leave donation policy that allows employees to donate their accrued vacation, sick leave, or comp time to be used by another employee who has exhausted all forms of paid leave due to experiencing a catastrophic illness or injury. Since 2013, the donations of the program have continued to decrease, and according to administration staff, the policy has not been used in many years. With the inclusion of, or the establishment of the paid family medical leave estate program, employee can utilize that PFML to help the financial exposure related to their leave and be able to reduce the amount of accrued leave that they utilize addressing that catastrophic illness or injury of themselves or a loved one. Excuse me. As such, we just wanted to bring this to council's attention and to have discussion about possibly terminating the sick leave as the PFML is now in place, and we do not envision usage of the program to increase with the new program in place at the state level.
Okay.
So looking for discussion, or if there's just a general.
Is there hours or time is there a bank for it right now?
The bank is done annually. If the hours aren't utilized, they're donated back, or given back to the employees who donated.
So there aren't any?
There are nothing that rolls over at the end of the year.
Are we okay with that?
You haven't been using it 13 years, it doesn't keep it around.
Great.
Okay.
All right, if there's a general consensus, we will work on putting together a RCA
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome. Any changes to the addition, Brad? To the agenda?
There are none, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll move right forward into public comments. If anybody has anything they'd like to address us about, that's not on the agenda, we would entertain those now. Now we'll move forward then. The following letters are considered non-controversial by staff and are recommended to be read and passed in one motion. Any council person, staff, citizen, or meeting attendee can request one or more items be pulled. The agenda will be pulled and addressed after the passage of the consent agenda. Otherwise, the following items will be passed in one motion. Number one, approve city council work session minutes from February 4th, 2026. Number two, approve the city council minutes from February 17th, 2026. Number three, approve the payment of bills and finance report. Number four, adopt resolution 2026-017, approving lawful gambling permit for Confidence Learning Center to conduct lawful gambling at the lodge at Brainerd Lakes. Number five, approve the permit for retail sales of fireworks for Fleet Farm and Menards for the period of May 1st, 26th through April 30th of 27. Number six, approve the issuance of a lower potency edible registration to Life Preserver Natural Foods, Inc. for the period of February 18th, 2026 through December 31st, 2026. Number seven, accept Planning and Zoning Commission minutes from February 10th, 2026. Number eight, adopt resolution 20-026-011, approving conditional use permits for a drive-through restaurant and joint access and a variance for principal structure size for property located at 8464 Fairview Road. Number nine, adopt resolution 2026-012, amending resolution 2026-009, approving plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for bids for the 2026 Clearwater Road, North Lyndale area, Brentwood Circle Street and Utility Improvements Project, municipal project number 4068. Please pull, Mr. Mayor. Well, number nine. Number 10, accept Utilities Commission minutes from February 5th, 2026. Number 11, approve 7 Brew escrow agreement for inspection services as-built. Number 12, approve the stormwater facilities maintenance agreement with access rights and covenants for 7 Brew. Number 13, accept the guidance and best practices for citywide speed limits, stop signs, dynamic speed feedback signs, speed humps, and center lines striping memorandum. Number 14, approve the BNSF invoice 90297300 in the amount of $1,361.92 for the 2022 Trunk Highway 210 and Inglewood Drive Improvements Project, City Improvement number 4121. Number 15, approve SEH contract in the not to exceed amount of $24,600 for 2026 KWIA, RRA, and ERP recertification. Number 16, approve SEH contract in the not to exceed amount of $9,500 for the 2025-26 water system capital asset management plan, the CAMP updates. Number 17, approve the SEH fee amendment number 2 in the not to exceed amount of $5,035 for a total revised not to exceed amount of $50,663 for additional professional services related to the fat spoils and grease program updates. Number 18, accept project summary memo for the 2025 water supply improvements, wells 5 and 6 project, municipal project number 6011-45040. Number 19, approve the Brad's Portable Excavated Heat Change Order number 4 in the increased amount of $6,555.65 for contract B related to the 2025 water supply improvements, wells 5 and 6 project, municipal project number 6011-45040.
Please pull number 19.
Number 20, approve Brad's Portable Excavated Inc. partial pay estimate number 8 in the amount of $9,738.12 for work completed on contract B related to the 2025 water supply improvements, wells 5 and 6, Municipal project number 6011-45040. Number 21, approve SEHP amendment number 3 in the not to exceed amount of $25,950 for revised total not to exceed the amount of $481,889.80 for additional professional services during the construction phase related to the 2025 water supply improvements. Wells 5 and 6 municipal project number 6011-45040. Number 22, approve a project budget increase from $2,423,790 to a revised budget amount of $2,490,500 for the 2025 water supply improvements. Wells 5 and 6 municipal project number 6011-45040. 23, accept Quality Flow Systems Inc. proposal for lift station number 27 control panel, pumps, hatches, and accessories in the amount of $58,650 related to the 2026 Clearwater Road, North Mendel area, Brentwood Circle Street, and utility improvements project. Municipal project number 4068. Number 24, accept Anderson Brothers construction quote in the amount of $9,950 for the Whiskey Creek pedestrian bridge project. Number 25, approve the KLM engineering proposal in the amount of $4,000 to perform a clean out and disinfection of the 400,000-gallon south water tower. Number 26, approve the Growing construction cost share agreement for roadway pavement markings on various city and backstreet streets. Project number CP 18-200-144. Number 27, approve the bold and make amendment agreement for professional services for 2026 CIP and pavement management GIS assistant in the not to exceed amount of $15,290. Number 28, adopt resolution number 2026-015, ordering preparation of report for the 2026 Bill and Overlay Improvements Project, municipal project number 4426. Please vote. Number 29, adopt resolution number 2026-016, receiving feasibility report and calling the improvement hearing for the 2026 Bill and Overlay Improvements Project, municipal project number 4426. Number 30, approve the WSM Whitsett agreement for professional design services in the amount of $81,500 for the 2026 Mill and Overlay Improvements Project, municipal project number 4426. Number 31, approve the Landwehr excavating and landscaping 3-year street sweeping contract.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion is
Point
second.
of clarification, being that number 28 was being pulled for discussion, I think Councilmember Cross, you referenced that 29 and 30 are related to that.
That's fine.
And I would exclude those. So
Yeah, I think we should
that,
look at
you know, you're not approving something that.
Yep.
You're willing to amend your motion.
I will amend my motion.
And I will second the amended.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
All same sign, motion carries. First item was item 9, number 9.
I pulled on it because I haven't seen the CIP report yet. And I'll be voting no.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about that?
I'll move for approval of number 9.
I have a motion. Second by Patrick. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you. Next item, that is 19, was it?
Yes, I had a question about 19, and it was really just in the wording inside of there. It says the flow meter supplied as part of the contract did not work properly during startup. Contractor that supplied the flow meter suggested an alternate. It just kind of jumped out as a little different from a lot of the other change orders, in that often our change orders are driven by unforeseeable circumstances or something that changed due to our team changing a requirement, so I just wanted a little explanation on, I guess at face value, it sounds like, to me, the company that we purchased the flow meter from said, here's a flow meter that'll work, and it didn't. So we're paying an added cost, and maybe I'm missing, we're just paying for the one that does work and not the original one that didn't. I don't know if anybody here actually has that knowledge on hand or not.
Could you repeat that, Zach?
Yeah,
What you thought it interprets?
In essence, I guess, what I read that to mean was somebody provided us something that didn't work. So we're paying for the fact that it didn't work. And maybe there's just a clarification in there that they provided something that didn't work, so they switched it out, and we're just paying the difference in cost between what we should have paid.
And we're not paying, we didn't pay for anything other than what we spec'd out. We paid for the actual Rosemont meters that went in. And it was not the meter's fault or what was causing the fault. It's actually the backflow preventers had to have the seals changed in them because of the lower pressure that we run in the pipes on the wells. So it had nothing to do with the meter itself. It had to do with the backflow preventer that was put in. So however Kevin worded that in there, yeah, I'll talk to him and have him clean up the language, because that's not how it should be interpreted.
Okay, so it was a non-issue in essence.
It was a non-issue with the type of meter that we spec, and had nothing to do with that at all.
Okay.
But it still costs us $9,700 more.
Well, it's more to it than just the meter itself. It has to do with the programming with IPS to the panel, and then it also had to do with changing those seals out in those backflow preventers, which was all related to why it wouldn't read on the open pipe flow, or not. When you put it to open pipe flow is the only way that it would read properly. You're not supposed to run the meter in that mode. So it's a little more complicated, but the 9700 was for the whole change out of both some of the programming in the IPS panel and for those backflow preventer seals being changed out. Plus you have to pull the meter out, so you gotta put new seals in the meter, and then it's all labor to do that. So a little more to it, but it's related to the meter not reading the open pipe flow only, which is a setting on the meter itself. We were getting no readings at all, or we were getting negative backwards readings from the meter itself. But it wasn't the meter itself, it had to do with other things of how the meter was installed and the programming and those backflow preventers. Because it's an air release valve too on that backflow preventer.
Good with that, or you want more?
I think I'm good with it. I just want to make sure that it's something that you would say is well within norm.
Well within normal range, of things that needed to be cleaned up in order to work properly.
All right, then I will move for approval of 19.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Where are we at now, Brett? 28?
Items 28, 29, 30.
I will lump items 28, 29, and 30 all together. I pulled them again due to the fact we do not have a CFD report. And I'm following through on what I said I was going to do. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the 28, 29, 30.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I just think, I guess I will say something before we vote. You know, this one is also bumping up into this year, but had we been voting on the 27 feasibility report right now, I think I would also be voting no. It should be just something something that I think it's time for us to have what Mr. Cross is asking for projects moving forward. So having said that, I guess I'm willing to move the 26 project forward myself, but I wouldn't move for 27s.
Yeah, the one we approved earlier, number 9 or whatever it was, that, we've been dealing with that for over a couple of years, and people are anxious to have that one done, so I don't have a problem with that. This one we haven't really gotten too far into the weeds with yet either. And I do feel that we need to, we need to have a plan. Quit having reports done and spending more money. That we need to throw the anchor out and slow everything down and figure out how we're gonna deal with this. A number of things, the CIP is part of that, workload, that type of a thing too. So I can go either way on this one, although there are people on this one that also want the project. And so it's always that problem too, that, how do we move forward here? We have a motion and a second.
Oh.
And,
This is for the city of Baxter. Notice you got your lights on yet.
That's us.
You're on the server.
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, it's, the CA repeat report's only part of it. We've been waiting for quite some time to integrate it, so, whatever it takes to get it.
I guess as long as we have discussion open for this, I do want to double check. It may have slipped by me on this mill and overlay situation. How much notice has been given to the residents in question regarding timeline before we're at this point? Because this project will start in July or August, correct?
Correct. So the first notice that will be going out will be the one mailed this week for the residents on the project.
Okay, so that's $7,600 is only about a 3-month lead time this time?
Correct.
Okay.
And that was a concern of mine too, where there's really no informational meeting, we're jumping right to, we're skipping a step, which we didn't want to do. We wanted to have as much conversation as possible, so that bothered me a little bit on this project too.
I think we have this step though, that we have that hearing. It's just we had it so far back.
It was originally scheduled, yes. The intent, the way the original schedule was laid out, it was hold a public informational meeting. It wasn't quite the 18 months, but it would have been closer to that 12, 10 months.
So
lead time.
It did happen or it didn't happen?
It did not happen.
I looked at the names of the people, I never saw their faces here, so.
Yeah, no, we haven't had any public meetings pertaining to
That
this
was my point.
project yet.
How did we miss it?
We didn't. So I don't know, we have a motion and a second, we have a project that needs to be done. And, but I think, to Zach's point too, going forward, we do throw the anchor out and, until we feel better about, statistics and so on and so forth, so. We'll call for the vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So, I asked for just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
2027 projects are on hold until the CIP is developed, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, they aren't here, are they?
We haven't made a motion to that effect. I've only made a comment to that effect,
Okay.
and the mayor made a comment.
But it sounded like
I agree
general,
with the sentiment.
a general understanding of a majority, being yourself, Councilmember Tabbitt, and Mayor Olson, have indicated that moving forward 27 any further until a CIP is clear, is not being considered.
For 27 projects on here.
27 was on your pre session.
The
work session.
Work session.
Identifying the streets.
And I may have caused a little confusion in that I stated that had there been a motion for 27 feasibility reports, I would have voted no. Because of the $7,600 in 3 months, I chose to vote no to these as well. But
And why I'm bringing it up is in his presentation, we were gonna have the public informational meeting here coming up in March for 2027, in order to get closer to that 18-month notification. And I'm hearing that's not going to happen. Because we don't know if we're doing 2027 projects. I don't wanna schedule something that the council's not behind. That's why I'm bringing it up.
And based on the testimony this evening, I would say that we have a majority that would be of that opinion.
That's why, so 2027 is on hold.
I hate to plead ignorance here, but I didn't know I was voting on 27 projects, so.
No, you're not, but there was a PowerPoint presentation by Alec.
Excuse me, I was here.
Yeah, I know.
I think the city administrator took your comments that you were on the side of waiting on those until we got a CIP report. If that's not the case, then just say.
Yeah, because what I heard was throw the anchor down and not supportive of moving forward without a CIP, with 27 projects without a CIP. And so, before we incur expenditures and resources on the proposed 27 project that was laid out in the work session, I have basically 3 that are indicating that it's not going to be supported. So, is that the general intent, that we won't complete the feasibility or hold the informational meeting until such time we have the CIP?
Or do we finish the feasibility study and don't hold the information we have?
We can do that as well.
Several different ways to go with that. I just want to be clear going forward.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg thing going here too, though, if we could get it resolved by 27, that would be fine. But then we'd have to have the hearing now, so.
Well, it's an informational meeting is what gets delayed.
We can present it such that there's no CIP, we're not set whether it'll go in 27, 28, or 29. We can keep it more loose.
Or you complete the feasibility study, and by the time that's all done, then plug in the informational and commence the process. There's several ways, as Trevor indicated, there's several ways to do it, but I asked for the conversation based upon what I've heard from 3 of the 5 of you expressing concern about bringing anything forward related to 27 until such time.
maybe for the sake of propelling this forward, I would ask, and I don't know, Mr. Cross, if you have details on what would leave you content. I'm open to some version of a plan. I'm not talking about a massive 18-month study that requires a bunch of expenditures just to accomplish. I'd be content with some sort of a forward-looking projection of costs that would hopefully be something we can do efficiently. But I don't want to speak for you.
Well, I don't know what it takes to finish our CIP report. We've been asking for it for a while. Keep saying it's coming. How long will it take to finish it? Can it be finished? Can't, I mean, obviously it's an ongoing living document, but at some point we have to push it forward, show it to us.
Yeah, I know that finance is working on it.
schedule, we'll wait.
We'll just ask the question again next work session. So, thank you.
I think, that can be frustrating to people to bring them in for a meeting, it doesn't mean anything, because we're questioning about it, so you're antagonizing them, it makes our job rougher too, so wanna make sure we think things through here before we do those things. Staff, you can work on that,
Figure out that on the next work session.
figure out what the best route to go is there. Thanks, everybody, for your input there. Okay, on to council comments.
I have two. One came to me from my husband. He was at an event last week, and a retired state trooper who now lives in Baxter sought him out and said, please share with council my opinion that it was absolutely the right thing to do, passing the intersection. And he was very, very pleased that that's the route that we voted to approve. And then second thing, I drive Clearwater quite often, and I've noticed that even in the winter, the dog park has had a lot of cars and a lot of traffic, and that it reminded me that there's an issue with the upper side of the dog park, and I think because it didn't drain properly, or it was really too wet, that perhaps fill needs to be brought in. I just wanted to bring that up, make sure that that was on some type of agenda, because it's a shame that more dogs are going out to the smaller area because they get a little bit too wet. That's all.
Okay, Zach?
I have no comment.
Andrew? Have no comments. Mark? No comments. Now the city administrator.
We've got two items, Mayor. First one is acknowledgement of exit issues has been scheduled for Friday, March 6th at Madden's, 7:30. This is the annual breakfast and event that we have bring the local state legislators in and talk about what they're seeing and things of that nature. If you're interested in participating, please let me know and I'll get you signed up. Second is in relationship to municipal, or MIDOT's response to municipal consent based on them accepting those conditions. It's been referred to as there's a visual quality or aesthetics committee that needs to be put in place and start working on those related items. Councilmember Cross has volunteered on that. I'm going to be serving on that, and if would like to have 5 members from the community. I know that in talking with a few of you, you said that we should go out to persons of interest out in the community. If you have names which you would like me to contact, my goal or objective is to be bringing you a list to choose from there. Unless council wants to appoint people tonight, be happy to do that, but I know you want to do it organically and just looking for any feedback. So if you have any names that you'd like me to reach out to and have conversation with, I'll do that over the next 2 weeks. So.
I think, voice of one, this is a big deal, and it involves our community, and so, what I saw coming through first was 2 staff members and a council member, maybe 2 council members. That deck is pretty stacked. We need to have more people from the community. I don't know what that number is. If it's 5, in addition to our staff, that's fine. But our staff, in my opinion, our staff members really shouldn't be a part of that committee per se. I mean, they should be there as advisors or answer questions, but not decision makers. And so if that means 5 additional people from the community, I'm okay with that. I don't know that there's a maximum number that, somebody even said, oh, why don't you just throw it out there and have people submit their names if they're interested, and you could pick from them. And that's dangerous too, I know. But my personal feeling is I want as many people from the community to be on this as possible.
I agree.
Not employees and council people only.
Mr. Mayor, just a comment. I think it'd be clear to concept parameters for this committee that it is an advisory advisory committee. I see it as an advisory committee to bring back the information from MnDOT, costs associated with upgrading the visual, the look of this, and that the ultimate, because we'll be spending extra money to do anything above the base aesthetic, falls back on the five of us to approve.
Right. I agree.
Just so that's clear, it's not a committee that necessarily is gonna say yes or no, but a committee that's going to make a recommendation to the council.
That's how it would be structured.
I
That's how it would be structured.
Okay. So it's
agree with
clear.
that, but would also encourage it to be more than just a committee picking from a MnDOT book kind of a situation. If there's any possibility for more creativity for more creativity to come out of that group, I appreciate it in terms of bringing recommendations, things like, you know, offering sections of open space to local clubs to beautify or things like that, that might allow for more general community pride in the look of all of that. And I'd also, just for my personal opinion of one would be, I wouldn't want the committee to be more than like 9 at the max. I think 7 would be an appropriate size, just that we don't want to set a committee of 25 people and have it become unwieldy.
Right. When I memorized the surveys that were presented, it was an interesting concept because there were people that said, don't do anything that's gonna cost us any more money. We're not gonna pay taxes for this. And then there was another group that said, well, as long as we're gonna do it, don't chintz on it either, make it look nice, you know. So there was a wide variety of ideas there. But I think the majority of the people want it to look nice. It's gonna be the gateway to our city, so it'll be interesting to hear what people have to say about this one.
So I'd be looking for names from council members to
Okay.
submit to me, and I'll reach out to those individuals.
Very good. Sooner the better, I guess.
That'd be preferred.
Okay. Is that it, Brad?
That is all. We just have one remaining item, which is to go into closed session under Minnesota Statute 13D03 to discuss labor negotiations.
Motion to close the open and